Hey, my stars, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm super excited because I have a female guest for Boundless Visionaries. As you know, March is Women's History Month, so it's very important for me to snag an awesome guest who is a female. She is a mother, an entrepreneur. She is a business owner. She is an author, an entrepreneur, and I already said that, right? Okay, I think she should introduce herself. But before we get into it, I think you should know that she is so special because she was able to overcome so many boundaries within her childhood. So without further ado, I welcome you, Dusti Stark. Hey,
Thank you so much.
Dusty. So how are you doing today out in
I'm
Texas?
doing great. Yeah, so happy to be here. Texas is feeling less like warm as it usually does. It's been thundering and raining, but good
Oh,
otherwise.
God.
It's nice to have a little
There.
cool. Yeah.
So, Dusty, can you tell everyone a little bit about how you grew up and what that was like for you?
Yeah, so my background is a little bit rocky. I have been primarily raised with grandparents, and my history, there's a lot of addiction and really bouncing around. So that it was not an easy walk, but definitely there's a lot that I pulled out of a lot of the hard experiences. I would say the hardest experience of my background is that my younger sister went into foster care and ended up adopted by that foster family. And so that's kind of the root of a lot of my desire to spread awareness for foster care and adoption is that I can see that firsthand in the need for children to have a safe home and have their needs met. So,
Are you and your sister close today, or did you lose
yeah.
contact?
Actually, we had an open adoption, thank God. So I was able to see her for certain holidays and things like that. But it's not like being raised with your sister in the same house kind of relationship. And so we did get closer actually as I moved into my college years. So I was able to see her more. And then now it's amazing how much we have in common. She's actually a licensed clinical social worker as well. She loves art, like all these things that we have in common. And so it's really neat to see even though we weren't raised in the same home, how many similarities we do share.
Oh, I love that. And you also have a brother, correct?
I do. I have an older brother, and we were primarily raised together. There were times that we weren't, but for the most part, we were raised in the same home. So my younger sister is actually 11 years younger than we were. So by the time she came along, my grandparents were caring for us, but they just didn't feel like they could restart again, like on their third set, really. And so they didn't think they were maybe the right long-term situation for her. So yeah,
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
yeah.
So, how did that play a role in how you were looking at the world as a child, dealing with that, and how it affected your self-esteem?
Yeah, I think during those times, I didn't realize it, but I just didn't really feel like I mattered or belonged because I was bouncing around and I felt like a burden that, my grandparents had already raised their kids, or if I was staying with friends and things, I just felt like, they were my community, they were supporting me, but I was very aware, like I'm not their child. I'm in their home, they're caring for my needs. So there was definitely that sense of not knowing. I didn't really have like future plans. A lot of people talk about like, oh, I've always dreamed of my wedding and when I have kids. And I, looking back now, was a lot in survival mode. So I just didn't think beyond that time. And a lot of times was making choices that now looking back is like, oh, that was coping, but unhealthy kind of stuff because I just didn't have the know-how and the tools to manage a lot of the pain that I was dealing with. So it was later when I went back to school for counseling and all of that, that I did a lot of my own kind of healing and work before I could move into helping other people through their trauma and being able to take those lessons and values out of the hard things of life.
That is really interesting. You said something that jumped out to me, and it
Mhm.
was survival mode. I was not focusing on what I'm going to do in the future, what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when children are dealing with these unstable environments, that's what they're in. That's what they're thinking about. They're not, it's hard for them to get out of that. So, how did you get out of that and start focusing on what you needed to do in order to become a better person?
I think something switched in me at 15 because I was able to get my first job. And actually, at the time, I had a boyfriend and was told things like, you could do anything you want to. And it was just interesting to hear those things that I was like, really? Because I didn't really see that myself. And so to be able to borrow from those positive messages that I didn't necessarily carry. And so I think from that point at 15, something switched where I just thought there is no safety net. Like if you mess this up, there is nowhere to fall, because our family didn't have money. We weren't, set up. There was that situation. And I was just like, oh my goodness, it's a very short time and I'm going to hit the streets. Like I have to figure this out. So I really flipped a switch where it was like I started getting A's. I started like getting to work. And so yeah, I think looking around, I could see all these examples, good and bad, and realized what does that mean like in 5 years, 10 years, making these different choices. And so I really got kind of close with, like, had a very few select people that I would actually surround myself with from that point forward. And they had to kind of meet a criteria. Like I didn't want all the drug world. I didn't want all the, like all the stuff that I had kind of grown up around and seen. And it was really kind of normal in the school that I was going to. And I just didn't want it. I didn't want any of it because I didn't want that future.
Right.
So,
In doing that, did you have to let go a few friends?
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think I kind of hit a lot of I feel like what people maybe hit in college in like 11, 12, 13, because I had so much freedom. At 11, my dad just handed me a bus pass. Like I could go all over Eugene, Oregon. Like I was an 11-year-old with all this freedom. And so I did a lot of things, I think, young that I look back and go, oh my goodness, I can't believe I was like 11. When I look at my children at those ages, I'm like, there's no way. But
Right.
it was a different time and a different experience that my dad had. And so the way of looking at things, which he's passed away at this point, but he was an addict until he passed. And there was just a different way of thinking around different things. It's like, if you're going to do it in front of me. Like he didn't have like law, you didn't necessarily follow a law. It was just like, what do you feel like is right? There was things, just a mentality, kind of a criminal mentality. And that's not a blame thing. It's just to recognize his way of thinking affected his parenting of me during those seasons. And so he was in and out of jail a lot. And so those kinds of examples I could see, like where kids growing up are like, oh, cops are pigs, or like these horrible things, is because when you're raised in an environment where, if they deal or if they use, they're not going to be like thinking cops are great. But if you're on the other end, which I also got with my grandparents, that they really towed a line and they're like, this is right and this is wrong and this is what the law says, so when I'm with them, it's a totally different scenario. It's like, no, those are the people that help you when you're in trouble. Those are the people that you call on. So I could see the different mentalities depending on the way someone's living their life and the way that they view authority and all of that. So
You had those two perspectives very early on.
really extreme different perspectives. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's fast forward. You graduate from high school, you're changing your life around. Then what?
Then I went on to college and got a bachelor's in science, and then decided kind of along the way that really wasn't. I was moving toward pharmacy school, had applied to pharmacy school, had worked in pharmacy for like 6 years. And I started working at 15 and never stopped. So it was one of those things, like I said, something switched in me where I'm like, I got to work for it. And there's nobody coming to save me. So I did. I worked really hard all through college and getting myself on my feet, but realized that isn't really what I wanted. It didn't align with my values. I believe that there's a place for medication and all of that. I have pharmacist friends, but it wasn't my jam to like count pills and talk GI upset. And I just saw the damage kind of as well on the other end of people taking a lot of prescriptions. And so I wanted to go into preventive medicine. So I moved into counseling and then went on to get my master's as a licensed clinical social worker. So I could work more with kind of what's underneath, when people go to get pills, but like, there's all this other stuff often that hasn't been dealt with, or things like nutrition and, all these other things that I felt like we really need to address a lot of those things and not just expect to throw a pill at it and that it's going to fix it. So,
I love that, digging into it and saying, hey, what is the problem internally that we can get to change around to help you outside
yeah.
that? Yeah. So you're into the social work and you're like, this is my calling. And from there, Dusty, I just feel like you just ran with it. There's so many accomplishments that came from you making that decision as a social worker. You're now an author, you have 2 books, you have this nonprofit organization. So tell me about some of the things that came along with that.
Yeah, I would say my greatest accomplishment is being a mom because I have 8 children that live in my home currently, and 6 of them we were able to foster and either gain adoption or guardianship. And so I've seen just, I mean, family being built, right? That God knits families together. I'm so grateful for my children and the way that each of them came to me. And I, through this process, kind of slowed down in some ways with my career, was like, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to like be a mom first and then do these other things. And so I am really grateful. Honestly, that's why when I talk about, oh, I feel like I've had so many dreams accomplished already. Like I thought, oh, okay, I'd love to have a little farm. I'd love to have my family. I want to write a book. I want to maybe do a nonprofit, maybe speak, maybe. And I'm just kind of like, check, check, check. And so I'm an achiever type. And so I do get driven by goals, but there's also that aspect. It's like I'm always trying to go back to, but what's really important, and that I'm not losing sight of, like, if I'm laying on my deathbed, I know that sounds really morbid, but I think this way where it's like, what really matters? Like, what am I doing today that really matters? Is this kingdom work? Is this something I'm going to be proud of on my deathbed? Or am I getting out of sorts with my priorities and I have to reset because I do find my family is my first my main priority, and then some of these other things that I just feel like I have like a fire in my belly for foster care and adoption. So it's one of those things that's like I can't wait to share about it. I can't wait to write my next book or article or have these conversations, because I think a lot of times people don't know the extent of children in their own community that are in wait for a home, for a family, for safety, to be able to really flourish, like you said, when they're in survival mode, where if they have a full belly, they can learn at school. If they have people receiving them, picking them up, or taking them to do some of these other outlets that are really healthy for them, maybe they wouldn't have those experiences had they been in that other home. So yeah, so I'm really grateful to kind of spread that through Fostering Bridges, which is our nonprofit, which I'll just throw out if anybody wants to check it out. It's www.fosteringbridges.com. And we're located in East Texas. And really, we serve birth, foster, kinship, and adoptive families. So we definitely care about the preventative part of that, as all the way through permanency with whatever that looks like for children and families.
That is a lot. I never came across a nonprofit thus far that does all those phases. That's
Mhm.
very unique.
Yeah.
What do you think the common misconception about the foster care system is?
I would say the thing I hear the most is nervousness. Like, people don't want to say these questions out loud, but it's like, ooh, what if we take in that child, and how will that affect our family? Like the other children they may already have, or they're concerned about being able to handle whatever the behaviors, and especially the letting go. That's always the first thing, like, oh my goodness, like I could never let go of a child that I got attached to. And so for me, a big thing about the mindset is if only for a short time, like you step in that way for that child, kind of open-handed, because if the family does reunite, which is the goal, if you're a foster family, it I mean, that imprints for both of you. I'm still very connected with children we've had through our home that were returned and those things. And I guess, as painful as it is to say goodbye, if you go into it with that mentality, is I'm here for this child for whatever period of time that they need that, then when you let go and they're able to return, it's like that's a success, to be able to do that for that child. And it doesn't change the emotional kind of ride that is, but it's so worth that. And I think anybody I've ever talked to, I'm yet to talk to, that's like, I regret ever doing that. I was like, no, even when they had to say goodbye, they would have redone it because it was that impactful for that child during that time that they needed that. So I love that selflessness to say, yes, I'm willing to step into the hard, and I'm willing to even be affected emotionally and do these things because this matters, and this child matters.
And that little bit of time, or it could be an extended period of time, that period of time in that child life makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
that stability.
And I've been a recipient of that. So I can say
Right.
that as staying with friends, staying with grandparents. Like, I don't know where I would be. I definitely wouldn't be talking about having written books and that, I mean, this is really because of what people have poured into me that I'm able to pour out now.
Mhm. So, Dusty, with all that you do and your big family, how do you manage making time for yourself?
I think my main self time is in the mornings because I get up well before everybody else in the household. And that's like my quiet devotion kind
Yeah,
of time.
they're like, you can have that time. I'm
I
still
guess
asleep.
so. I mean, if it has to be 5:30, it'll be 5:30. So we'll just, and I try to get some exercise and things like that. But I also got into the pageantry world this last year. And I would say now, looking back, I didn't see it then because I was like, oh, I'll use the stage, spread my message for my nonprofit. Like I had all these plans. But there was also an element to it that has been super great for me in self-care, just because now it's like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to what I'm eating and get my exercise and go do these different things. And it's been an adventure and super fun and fulfilling for me, like to fill my cup so that I can do these other things at home that I do a lot of pouring out for. So sometimes like sitting in a makeup chair is what just what I need.
I love
So
it. I'm like, you just do that, and I just sit here and enjoy
I
the results.
yes, yes. And feel so pampered. Yeah.
Right. It just does something. Okay. So I noticed something on your website. It's all about empowering women to transition into ladies without limits. I thought that was so interesting. So I'm interested to know, what do you feel the difference is between a woman and a lady?
Well, in general, the thing I think every woman is a lady, but I think sometimes seeing themselves as that is there's that part that we can be disconnected and we can set limits for ourselves that we feel like, oh, because I'm a woman, I can't, so then to say, no, you're a lady without limits, like you are, for me, just thinking of being a child of God, having that sense of power in everything that you're doing. It's like being the boundless, limitless person that you don't, that idea of like dreaming too big is not a thing. It's
Yeah.
good to dream beyond what your own capabilities are and to see God show up in that. And that's been my own testimony to feel like over and over I might think, oh, can I? But then it's like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of see, and then seeing that power come through and God providing abundantly in different ways.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
So, what advice would you have to a child that was in a situation similar to you, where they're in an unstable environment, they're on survival mode, and they're not thinking about their future? What would you say to those children?
Well, it's hard sometimes when you're in that space to think beyond it, but I sometimes will do even thinking of like a timeline exercise where sometimes we're just right where we are, but then extending that line. It's like you get to fill that in. Like all this other stuff has happened to you, but it doesn't define you. You get to like take from those things and then choose your next step. So that's been a big thing for me is that transformative work to be able to rewrite maybe some of the unhealthy thoughts and feelings they have toward themselves because of whatever they've experienced abuse or moving around or whatever that stuff is, that they can take those lessons. But to say I've experienced this, but that doesn't make me, like a lot of times when you think of shame, you think of instead of I made a mistake, it's like, no, I am a mistake. And so shifting that thinking out of shame and into that sense of I can learn from things and I can move forward. I am not stuck. This is not my forever. So even having a lot of times attached shame with having experienced abuse to be able to separate from that and go, you know what, that isn't my identity. That is something I experienced and I get to choose how to move forward in the world and not put that on other people. Because sometimes when we don't do that work, we unintentionally are hurting other people.
That was so profound. I made a mistake. I am not a mistake.
Yeah.
And that they can rewrite their future.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be a continuation of their past.
Absolutely.
Well, Dusty, I want to thank you for this, and not only for the interview, but for everything that you do in the community, for all of the involvement that you have with people, just informing them about the foster care system, helping children within the foster care system. This is very impactful work because when you help the family, you're helping the community, you're helping the nation. It just goes bigger and bigger and bigger. So, can you let us know what you have coming up next and where people can follow you on your journey?
Yes, I'm actually in process of a third book. So I am a contributing author with Faces of Foster Care. So we're putting out volume 3. So that's super exciting. And I'll just show the little picture here too. So we had volume 2, which is a bestseller. And so that's super
Right.
exciting. And also fosteringbridges.com, we're going to be posting as events are coming up. Like we have paint and sip stuff. We have things for the boys coming up with Battle Brothers and Living Like the King. We had a Princess Day happen recently. So we have some other girls things in the works for like tea parties and different things that we're going to be doing. So we just target different groups depending. And I also run a support group for foster kinship adoptive parents once a month. And so any of that stuff that anyone might be interested in, you can follow me on Facebook, Dusti Stark, or you can also check out my website, which is dustistark.com, and get connected with any of the different things that might fit.
Get connected. I'll put all the links in the bottom as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
I so appreciate you having me
Oh
on.
my goodness, of course. You are my first female guest. Like I'm looking back at all of my guests and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize I have not interviewed a female. So this is awesome, Dusti. And I want to thank you so much for watching my stars. Check out everything that Dusti has down below. And until next time, take care and stay bright.